Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on future of cybersecurity. We have our world famous analyst and expert, Professor Rob. Professor Rob, what you want to share with our audience?
Well, cybersecurity is going through an awful lot of changes. It was one of the first industries to look at and begin to adopt artificial intelligence as a mechanism to fight artificial intelligence being used as a threat actor. The underlying issue, of course, is if you've got an AI-based attack, particularly if it's a generative AI-based attack, you may be unable to tell that the fake email, the fake website, the fake instant message is coming from a bot, and of course the goal in most cases is to get access to your login information, your ID and password to whatever service they want to get access to. And it could be an attack that goes into the company. It could be an attack that goes after one of your accounts, like an Amazon account or whatever, to get access to your stuff. And then, of course, once one person gets access and learns your IDs and passwords, they share it broadly on the dark web, and and many others will do so. Some of my IDs and passwords were compromised years ago, and I use dual-factor authentication in most cases. But even so, invariably I get one or two notices a week that somebody's tried to log into one of my accounts with my ID and password, and if I didn't have dual-factor authentication, they probably would have gotten in. And the methodologies for getting access to your ID and password largely are a result of tricking you through email, through a phone call, which is one of the more common methods, or through text, that the person is other than who they are, might appear as a coworker, might appear as a woman or man interested in you interpersonally, might appear as a legitimate vendor, and in all cases they are not. And once you're compromised, for an individual that gets compromised, it costs upwards of $250,000 and a year of your time to fix the problem and restore your credit rating, which typically gets trashed in the process. So the future, as we look at the future of cybersecurity, we're talking about a much more comprehensive approach to how you secure a business. One of the big changes that the industry went through was initially most of the antivirus products only alerted if there was a breach. They didn't alert if there was an attempt to a breach, and that's changed. Well, it's changed in some applications. A BlackBerry security solution reports attempts, and other solutions are coming around to that idea that really what you want to do is you want to be notified that somebody's trying to break in, so you can begin to mitigate before they actually compromise your company. I was brought in into a case that was not disclosed to the media a few years back, where a group went in and over a year's time got access to the companies by spoofing an ID and password. They got access to a company's employee directory and their email system, and was able to email all the employees that the company was going to be merged, and they needed to provide their banking information so that they could get their final checks when the company transitioned into something else that was merging and they were shutting down. And the people that didn't get the email were the executives that would have known it was false. And the employees rapidly supplied their information. And by the time an employee told a manager or asked the manager what the hell was going on, and the company found out there was a breach, the attackers had vanished. The servers that had hosted the attack had been disabled, and all they knew was somebody in Eastern Europe had all their employees' personal banking information. It was expertly done, and so these new security applications are designed to notify you of attempted breach, of somebody trying to break into the company, to identify all the potential areas of exposure in the company, and then to automatically begin acting against the potential breaches, the exposures in the firm, so that the administrators aren't overwhelmed. That's been an historic problem with regard to security software in the next generation or the second generation, is that you have products that could identify where an exposure might exist, but then you would have to correct that exposure yourself. And in a large company, you might have millions of potential exposures. And so there was no, and so a lot of times that technology wasn't deployed because IT didn't want a list of things that they couldn't do that they should have done in case there was a breach, because they would immediately look negligent. And so automating a lot of this stuff has been critical, but being held accountable for problems that you knew about but didn't have the resources to fix, um, is a quick trip to early retirement, and getting another job after that can be problematic. So the industry has stepped up and really trying for a much more holistic approach to identifying potential breaches, be they on laptops, routers, servers, or infrastructure, and acting automatically against the breaches that are discovered to better cover the enterprise and the individuals and customers that work within it. Certainly, as you've seen, the different governments get involved. The penalties for breaches can be fairly high, and a big breach can have a negative impact on valuations. And so there's been a really big tug of war between governments wanting companies to disclose breaches and companies not wanting to disclose because they're afraid of what's going to happen to their valuation as a result. And I'm a little surprised, given how often companies don't report some of these breaches, how few companies have been held to account for not doing so. Currently in the United States, we're tracking a fairly large breach against the people that work in government that was incredibly creative, and looks like a lot of the politicians in the United States have been compromised as a result. So the industry stepping up now is just a question of companies actually deploying the technology before the next breach and to protect themselves, because the attackers are also moving to artificial intelligence. And there's an arms race between the attackers and the defenders in terms of who can use quantum computing best first. Quantum computing can not only potentially create passwords and IDs that can't be hacked, but it can be very effective on identifying or penetrating a company using by compromising the passwords of users through brute force. And a quantum computer can break a password, at least in theory, in a matter of seconds. And even the largest or most difficult encryption that's currently in place, the quantum computer is capable of breaching. So having a quantum defense is also part of this next wave of technology, mostly focused on cryptology, but has exposures in identifying passwords and potentially IDs as well, just because it can brute force at a level that no current computer could possibly handle. So being able to identify an attempt now becomes absolutely critical, because if a quantum computer could make an unlimited number of attempts to discern or identify what the password is for a user, then it can clearly go through there. But if you identify the attempt, then the quantum computer, even through brute force, probably cannot go in that way. But breaching encryption is something that it will always be able to do. And so quantum defense against encryption compromise is coming. So that's kind of initially that's what's going on. A heavy push to artificial intelligence and an arms race on quantum technology to protect before the quantum computer becomes an attack vector that can't be protected against.
Okay, Professor Rob, if you share few case study from Silicon Valley about cybersecurity, maybe it will be helpful for our audience.
Well, Silicon Valley has had a number of breaches over the years. Technology companies at least tend to be more secure than other firms. The breaches in most cases, though, have been the result of somebody supplying their password and ID through a phishing attack or a spear phishing attack, which is often the case where the executive's password and ID are compromised, and then they use that password and ID to get into the company and do harm. Most often, getting access to confidential customer information. But often also going in and getting access to confidential data. China has been identified as a major actor, as has Russia, in terms of going into companies and trying to pull out intellectual property and making away with them. The first breaches I got involved with in the tech sector actually go all the way back to the 1980s, when a couple of Japanese companies went after IBM to get access to their mainframe technology, and got caught using, at the time, a very traditional methods of bribing a IBM employee to gain access to that information. And then that employee actually came forward, and the FBI set up a sting and then caught the companies. It took out both of the companies that were engaging in industrial espionage. This has gone on off and on over the years. In the late 80s, early 90s, another IBM competitor came in and actually compromised one of the senior vice presidents of sales, and got him to supply information, and it cost. I was one of the people that was a part of the team that discovered this, and it cost the firm a tremendous amount of money to have an employee do that. Later we've had additional breaches but it's mostly caused by phishing and spear phishing, where somebody's supplied information improperly. The then CEO of AMD in the 90s was sharing confidential information over dinner to an attractive woman that was brought to that dinner just specifically to get information. He lost his job as CEO and had to pay a significant fine because the information he provided was undisclosed financial information. And the reason that he was targeted was the other guy at the table wanted that information so he could make insider trades. And so the Silicon Valley companies have a number of exposures as a result, both for customer information and for customer information, operational information, and intellectual property are all targets. People that want to do inside trades, companies that want to get access to undisclosed technological information so that they can better compete, and then getting the information from executives so they might compromise either the firm's financial viability by introducing a fake vendor, or by going after the employees themselves and stealing their money from their bank accounts, et cetera. Basically stealing their identity first and then benefiting from that. So that's off the top of my head. That's it. The companies that typically talk about breaches to us, the undisclosed breaches, get pretty upset if we disclose them. So I've got to be kind of careful.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Rob, if you share some of your experience about skill development in cybersecurity industry and job opportunity for the youth for this industry, also the entrepreneur, how they can invest in this industry and get benefit.
Sure. So upskilling in our skills in cybersecurity, often folks go into cybersecurity from law enforcement, or going to law enforcement from cybersecurity. The law enforcement has a tremendous need to have cybersecurity experts, as do companies do. So it's a certain amount of fluidity between practitioners going between law enforcement and cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is heavily math-based, so you need strong math skills as you go in, but most programming needs that as well. So not a lot of difference there. Cybersecurity often has a requirement for boots on the ground. So, for instance, Facebook, BlackBerry has put 1,000 people into their Ukraine effort, which is proven incredibly effective at stopping a lot of the cyber attacks that were generated out of Russia during the conflict, and allowing them to really ramp their cyber defenses. So undoubtedly, they're almost always looking for people in region to help them with those efforts. So they've got people that are in country that are looking at these problems, as well as people out of country looking at the attacks and trying to mitigate them. But in most cases, you're going to need some kind of a background in law enforcement and in cryptology to get into cybersecurity. There are continuing openings. The underlying skill set of people that have AI knowledge and cybersecurity knowledge is relatively low at the moment, and so having a combined skill set that includes artificial intelligence and cryptography would be a huge benefit to somebody looking for a job in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is also a job you kind of have to recognize has a number of aspects. You've got threat identification, you've got research into a breach, threat mitigation, and then just the block and tackle work of creating antivirus programs that are increasingly intelligent and threat detectors and mitigation that's based on artificial intelligence. And then one other thing, if you've got any kind of a quantum computing background, or you've been studying that, you're probably going to be golden in a very short period of time, because that's kind of the next wave of effort in these security firms is protecting against and understanding quantum computing, so it can be done well. So it's an area of opportunity. It can be very exciting. With cybersecurity, though, most of the excitement it goes much like any type of enforcement happens when you get a breach, and so it can be very tough. I mean, you can have a couple of weeks where nothing's really gone on, and then you could have a month or 2 months where you're working incredible hours trying to overcome an attack or trying to recover something that a ransomware has encrypted and contained. So the work is very uneven in terms of loading. And so you need to be up to speed and recognizing that sometimes you might be working 18-hour days, 7-day weeks if there's a major problem that has to be addressed.
Excellent. Professor Rob, when a startup they develop as a cybersecurity expert, what should be their marketing strategy at present conditions?
Well, selling any form of security is an insurance sale. And so you have to have people that understand how to do an insurance sale. When you've got a typical sale, you're selling people on the benefits of the product and getting them excited about what the product does. But security, you're selling people on a disaster that hasn't occurred yet, and you have to convince them that the disaster is imminent, so they put forward the money to prevent the disaster. So it's a very different. And we call it insurance sales. It's how you sell insurance. You sell insurance by convincing people the thing they're trying to protect against is imminent, and insurance is going to be the only way that they're going to be able to mitigate the problem without going broke. Same thing with cybersecurity. That people don't invest in it if they don't see the threat, and so you've got to make the threats very, very personal. You've got to make them very, very present, and you've got to make them very believable. And if you can do that, then you can convince the customer to invest in the whatever cybersecurity product you're trying to sell. It's particularly hard, though, for a new company to enter this space, because much like insurance, you need a track record. Buying a cybersecurity product from an unknown company is very risky, because there's no history in terms of how that product works and whether it will protect you. And you're almost assured, regardless of who you work with as a cybersecurity company, you're almost assured to have a breach. And as the buyer, you don't want to look negligent. And so buying a product from a company that has no background or experience in the face of a breach is going to make you look negligent, and that'll cost you your job, if not your career. And so it makes it really hard to ramp a cybersecurity firm from scratch at this point. You can create the theory and then hope to interest an existing cybersecurity firm into picking you up, either licensing your technology or buying it. But if you're going to go the full product route, that's going to be tough. If you haven't built up credibility individually and have a personal brand that people recognize, it's going to be very hard for you to ramp the company. So the best way to create a company is to spin out from an existing firm that is credible and has a good reputation, and then you use that background and history to showcase you're really not that new, that you have experience. And but that experience was just with another firm, and you've got a novel method that you've come up with that your old parent company didn't believe in, and then you're approaching it that way. But it's tough, even if you have all that background. Getting companies to believe that you can do the job before you actually do it is very difficult. It's a typical hardcore problem on steroids. when it comes to insurance or cybersecurity or banking for that matter. It makes it very difficult because you have to have a history of doing the job before companies will take you on, but you can't get the history until companies take you on, and that creates a significant problem. This is not an area that I would personally go into from scratch, not unless I'd already had a tremendous amount of experience in the market and had enough credibility and visibility so that credibility and visibility would allow me to be believed early on as a viable provider of a solution in this space.
Excellent. Professor Rob, for banking industry, if
Yeah.
you guide how they can utilize cybersecurity, that will be helpful for emerging economy, like a detailed guideline for
really
banking industry.
the advice right now is, for God's sake, get rid of passwords and IDs. Use some other method of customer authentication. I mean, you can leave password IDs there as one of your factors, but you do not want to use password and IDs exclusively for access. You'll just have a lot of breaches, and banks tend to be relatively aggressive with regard to cybersecurity because they have a tremendous amount of fraud exposure, and so there are groups of firms that focus on banking. IBM being one of them. IBM probably has the most comprehensive banking security solution in the market, top to bottom, and of course the company is highly trustworthy. And if there is a breach, they have a history of protecting their clients that goes back decades. So they become, at least they're the gold standard that I use to set the bar and compare other companies to. And I would suggest that banks do much the same thing. They don't have to buy from IBM, don't have to buy their solution, but I would use them as the benchmark. And anything that underperforms what IBM is providing has a significant chance of being seen as negligent post-breach. So making sure that you're doing multi-factor and moving as aggressively as you can to maybe using an authenticator app. There are a number of authenticator apps out there. Google's and Microsoft's are fine, but that's even better as your second factor, and it's potentially less aggravating for the customer, because often what the banks are torn between is how do you put in place enough security without pissing off your customers, because the customers really don't want to go through the extra hoops of what often is required by banks when they get over enthusiastic about multi-factor authentication. So making it easy for the customer, but also making sure those alternate factors are in place and they remain uncompromised is incredibly important. But if I'm a bank, I'm not letting anybody in with just a password and ID. It just too big a chance you're gonna have a breach, and of course the customer is going to blame you, and then you're going to be faced with, do you keep the customer whole, or because the customer screwed up, do you let the customer suffer for their mistake? And most banks let the customer suffer, but it's a great way to just lose customers over time and lose trust of the customer base. And so making sure your customers are secure and remain secure using hopefully an authentication app, but at least a second factor would be very good. I should point out a lot of banks use text as a second factor, but that methodology has been compromised on a multitude of instances, and it just isn't reliable anymore. And so using an authenticator app would be far better. So because so far there haven't been, at least to my knowledge, any breaches that use that authenticator apps. There have been breaches that have resulted from dual factor and people's smartphones getting compromised. You have to build a competence as a bank. You have to have a cybersecurity competence in-house, whether you use BlackBerry to help or IBM or one of the other tier one firms. Making sure that firm has been involved in really setting up the mitigation methods and helping your staff, your IT staff, understand some of the exposures, and making sure that your executives are trained against phishing attacks. The big exposure for any company remains phishing attacks, particularly spear phishing attacks, and executives are often the cause of some of the largest breaches that occur, and making sure both employees and executives are trained to protect against phishing attacks becomes incredibly important. And I point out executives because they often opt out of training. They figure, hey, I'm an executive, I know this shit, I don't need to go through it. And when I used to do security audits, it was those executives that almost invariably I could compromise and get access through, and then they showed up on an internal audit report as being negligent. And trust me, that's not good for your career if you retain it. I actually got into one of the CEOs of secure vaults because they were completely ineffective at protecting that vault, and that was after the guy bragged all over the company that he knew security better than anybody else, and we were all idiots. So just recognizing everybody's got to, from the CEO down, everybody's got to be part of the security solution. If they're not, they're going to be part of the problem. Oh, looks like you're frozen. So a lot of the ways you get compromised is to be aware of is that people present themselves as somebody that they aren't, and the first trigger is really when they start acting for information. I had an attempted breach here the other day where they called in indicating that they were a credit checking agency and they wanted to provide me with a free report. But as soon as they started asking me for challenge question answers, I realized this wasn't them, and that they were trying to scam me. And that's often the trigger. As soon as whoever it is, if they're on the phone and they're asking you for things like, hey, what was your first car? Or what city did you grow up in? Or any of those things, and particularly if they're doing it on social media, they're going after challenge question answers. And people need to know, as soon as they see that somebody's attempting to get access to their identity, and to stop engaging, whether it's an email and text or in social media, and particularly don't respond to those random questions on social media that are challenge questions. They're the same as challenge questions. And yet I watch on social media all the time these things pop up, and people are putting in their answers in it, and not realizing that what the person on social media is attempting is to seal their identity. And so the training to make sure, almost constant training to make sure that employees and particularly executives aren't compromised in that fashion is critical to protect against the next breach, because no software company is going to be able to protect you if your own employees are acting against the security policies. And so making sure employees know those policies and know how to operate within them is important. And that includes things like not letting people tailgate into the companies. Another way companies are breached is somebody gets in the company and gets access to an unsecured laptop or desktop PC and goes in that way, or leaves that, or is at a airline club or a coffee shop or whatever, and goes to the bathroom and leaves their laptop open and unsecured, and somebody comes in and gets access that way. So making sure the employees are almost constantly reminded that they are under threat and they need to behave accordingly is one of the best methods right now to protect a company that would otherwise be a target from a potential breach.
Excellent. Professor Rob, actually our audience very much interested about to know more Silicon Valley activities and company. You cover a lot about the future of cybersecurity. If you share some of the interesting story of like story of the corporate build-up in Silicon Valley, it may be helpful for our audience, especially those who are students. And I know you have a lot of experience to work with many largest companies in Silicon Valley. So, and then yes.
I'm not sure what you're asking. Ask me that question again. I couldn't follow what you were asking.
Like basically, we want to know more about the corporations who build up business in Silicon Valley. What is the story, or what is their strategy, and how they become so big and successful? So,
generally, the way a company grows, whether it's a tech company grows, whether it's in Silicon Valley or someplace else, because there are a lot of places in the United States that are kind of Silicon Valley-like. You've got enclaves here in Oregon. you've got enclaves in New York, you've got enclaves in Texas, a lot of them in Texas, South Carolina. But the story is pretty much the same. What you start with is somebody that has a vision. The person that has the vision gets a series of people around them that are competent in building a company. They are often self-funded, or they find an angel investor, which is before a VC, to put up some money. But often the initial funding comes internally from their families and friends, and then they create a product that has potential. And then once they've got a product, particularly once they have a product and have some initial sales, then they approach the VCs to get additional funding that allows them to staff up. And when they staff up, they make sure they have the full breadth of people. They have experts in human resources. They have experts in, if they're doing manufacturing. They have experts in software development. And then they use that to build the company into something that can go public. They take the company public, use that money to expand the company even farther. But it's always a case of making sure you've got both the vision and the goal and the experience built into the company before going forward, and recognize that far more companies fail than succeed. And most of the companies that fail, either they fail because the product has no market, the vision is inconsistent with what the market wants, or it fails because they lack the skills necessary to run the company. And I'd say there's a third method, and that's they get the money, they think they won the lottery, and they spend the money in ways that are inappropriate, or it's not connected to the business. One company that comes to mind that came up in the 1990s and early 2000s was the Panda Project, which was massively funded. But then they were doing things like having the employees fly private jets all over the place and having parties and banquets, and they just burned through all that cash. Iconic office buildings, expensive offices, just burned through the money. And they had a great product. The screwy thing is that they had a well differentiated, really interesting product in both servers and PCs, but because they couldn't control the cash burn, they ran out of money and went under. And so that is a story far more common than the stories of success. And so making sure that you have a solid vision, the customers that are out there that actually want the product, and that you staff the company eventually with people that are very competent in the individual areas becomes the critical path to assuring success at the back end. But even if you do everything right, you may not make it. The other mistakes that young companies make are sharing their technology with larger firms without protections, which is generally always a mistake, because the larger firm may take what you share and turn that into their own product, and put you out of business. And they may do it on purpose, they may do it accidentally. And so oversharing can be another huge mistake that a young company makes, as they try to convince a larger company to take their wares, take their goods, take their technology. Employee retention is also incredibly important. Often you've got a founder, and you can watch this happen with Elon Musk. And in Elon Musk's head, the only person that's really important is Elon Musk, and that's not uncommon with founders, where they really don't credit their subordinates. They figure they could replace their subordinates with monkeys, and that kind of attitude is really bad in terms of retention. And if you can't retain your qualified employees, invariably you'll also go under. So you've got that problem.
Thank you, Professor Rob. What's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, the attack surface for cybersecurity is increasing by the moment, and the technology behind the attacks is significant. You actually have entire multinational companies that all they do is develop malware, and that's a problem. The big firms, often out of Russia and China, that specialize in this stuff and will sell it, and so the threats have never been higher, and so you need a comprehensive approach to security, and only a handful of firms can supply that. Firms like BlackBerry and IBM are at least top of my list. Most firms are focused in one particular area or another, but recognize that wherever you don't have emphasis, that's likely where you're going to get an attack. And your employees are undoubtedly your most exposed attack vector. And if there's one area that could be addressed and could be addressed without a whole lot of cost, it's employee training. Just making sure the employees are reminded on a regular basis of the ways that they could be compromised, and to always keep their eyes open and recognize that they could at any time become a target. And if they're successfully breached, it's probably not only going to end their job, it's going to end their career. And you don't come back from that. And it doesn't matter if you think you're bulletproof as a CEO or a senior vice president. You're not if you're the source of a breach. And so making sure that everybody's on board. So approach the problem comprehensively. The stuff's got to work together. It's got to interoperate with the other things that you've got in the company. It can't be just a layer that stands above and alone. And the employees have to be fully trained and retrained on a regular basis to prevent the next breach.
Thank you, Professor Rob. It's an excellent discussion, and through this process, our new entrepreneurs, they can learn many things, and especially your experience is very, very helpful for emerging economy. This month we are organizing conference with B2B conference. Definitely the business organization, they come and they will collaborate with the peoples, and we will attend in the Delhi. And coming July, we have a very, very special episodes, very, very special conference with the Nikola Tesla Technology Conference. We want you as a speaker for this conference, and we want to invite all of the famous people from around Silicon Valley and around North America. We need more of your support and collaborations and cooperations. Thank you, Mr. Rob, for your excellent support for World Talent Economy Forum. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government agency, corporation, and academy. Hopefully, through this process, you can learn and you can grow your knowledge, and you can get real life experience from the world famous speakers. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.